It was one of those quiet evenings where the house seemed to breathe with a gentle stillness. The living room was bathed in the soft, amber glow of a single lamp, its light pooling across the furniture and casting shadows that danced lightly against the walls. Outside, the faint hum of distant traffic was the only reminder that the world was still moving, while inside, the silence wrapped around her like a familiar, comforting shawl. She was in the middle of tidying up a stack of books, absently flipping through a photograph that made her smile softly to herself, when the sudden knock came. It was a hesitant, almost apologetic tap, and it made her start slightly, her pulse quickening before she even knew why. The sound was unmistakable, deliberate, yet tentative, and it echoed in the quiet hallway. Her hand hovered over the doorknob, fingers brushing its cool metal. She paused, telling herself it was probably just her stepson, or maybe a neighbor, but something about the knock felt different. Her chest fluttered, a mixture of curiosity and caution. She could hear a faint voice behind the door, male, familiar yet distant. It was her stepson's friend, the young man she'd seen only a handful of times, and the thought of him standing there, waiting, made her feel an odd, unfamiliar warmth. She hesitated, her hand tightening slightly on the doorknob. There was a strange awareness in that moment. The quiet of the house, the soft scent of the tea she had brewed hours earlier, and the way the lamplight brushed against her skin. She could almost feel the air shift around her as she decided, almost against better judgment, to open the door. When she did, he was there, framed in the doorway by the dim porch light. His eyes met hers immediately, a mix of embarrassment and something softer, something that made her heart catch. He shifted from foot to foot, an apologetic smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I'm sorry for dropping by so late," he said, his voice low, carrying a hesitant warmth that seemed to fill the small space between them. She noticed the subtle details, the way his hand lingered near the doorframe, as if unsure whether to step inside, the nervous energy in the slight tilt of his head, the way his gaze flicked from her face to the floor and back again. There was an innocence to him, a vulnerability that tugged at her chest, making her aware of the quiet flutter of her own heartbeat. For a moment, time seemed suspended. The hallway, the soft glow of the lamp, the faint smell of her perfume mixing with the evening air. It all condensed into this singular, suspended instant. She could feel the tension, delicate and electric, in the way their eyes held each other's, in the slight brush of his sleeve as he shifted, in the unspoken question that hung between them. Why was she letting herself notice him this way? Her hand lingered on the doorknob, but she made no move to close the door. Instead, she offered a small, tentative smile, and in that smile he seemed to relax slightly. It was only a brief interaction, nothing more than a knock and a door opened. Yet the quiet warmth that settled in the space between them hinted that this night, this small, unexpected knock, might be the beginning of something neither of them could ignore. The moment he stepped inside, the familiar domestic space seemed to take on a slightly different quality. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the wall clock, even the gentle creak of the floorboards under their feet felt heightened, as if the house itself was paying attention to the quiet tension building between them. He shuffled in awkwardly, one hand brushing the doorframe, the other tucked nervously into his pocket. There was a hesitancy in the way he moved, an unspoken apology in his posture. She noticed every detail, the slight crease at the corner of his eyes when he smiled, the way his shoulders lifted then sank as if he were unsure how to stand in her presence. For a fleeting moment, she wondered what it was that made her heart skip a beat. "Thanks for letting me in," he said, his voice carrying that soft, nervous energy that made the words feel fragile. He glanced around the room, avoiding her gaze at first, but the curiosity and respect in his eyes betrayed him. There was a subtle vulnerability in him, an honesty that made her want to offer comfort, though she wasn't sure what form that should take. She found herself observing him as he adjusted to the space, the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other, the small, unconscious gestures that revealed his nervousness. Her own hands moved to smooth her dress, brushing over the fabric as if to steady herself. She was older, experienced, aware of boundaries, Yet the unexpected spark of curiosity and quiet intrigue made her aware of how alive she felt in that moment. They exchanged introductions again, more properly this time, and she caught the faint blush on his cheeks. His voice softened as he spoke about why he was there. An errand for her stepson, something small. Yet it was the pretense of purpose that brought them together in this intimate space. She handed him a small cup of tea, their fingers brushing lightly as he accepted it. The touch was brief, almost accidental, but it lingered in her mind far longer than the few seconds it lasted. A laugh escaped her at one of his awkward jokes, low and unpracticed, yet genuine. He looked at her with a mixture of surprise and relief, as if her laughter had broken some invisible tension. The warmth of the moment was subtle but undeniable, a shared connection forming in the quiet of a late evening. She noticed the way his eyes lingered a little too long on her face, the quiet attentiveness in the way he listened. Despite herself, she felt a delicate pull, a flutter of something she had not expected to feel for a younger man who, until tonight, had been just a familiar name. Her chest tightened slightly as she realized the air between them carried a new weight, the gentle tension of curiosity, admiration, and perhaps the first hints of something more. It was awkward, yes, slightly improper if anyone knew, but in that dimly lit living room, with soft lamp light and the faint scent of tea and home lingering in the air, they found themselves noticing each other in ways neither had anticipated. Words felt unnecessary at times. A glance, a smile, a light touch on the hand was enough to start a story neither of them could yet name, but both could feel unfolding. The night settled into a gentle rhythm, the kind that only a quiet household can hold. Outside, the streetlights cast long, golden streaks across the living room floor, and the faint hum of distant traffic became background music to an intimate, unexpected encounter. She had expected him to drop by, run his errand, and leave, but instead he lingered, moving with a hesitant grace as he offered to help with a small task she had been putting off. They started with something mundane, stacking a few boxes in the corner, sorting through a pile of magazines. At first, it was awkward, their movements careful and polite, but as they worked side by side, a subtle ease began to settle over them. Their hands brushed occasionally while passing an item, each accidental touch carrying a warmth that lingered longer than it should. Her fingers felt the gentle pressure of his, brief yet grounding, and she found herself aware of the steady rhythm of his presence. He spoke quietly about his day, about little things, work, his friends, the music he had been listening to. There was a soft sincerity in his voice that made her lean in slightly, listening more intently than she normally would. She caught herself smiling at the way he paused, unsure whether to speak or stay silent, and the subtle way he mirrored her movements without realizing it. She realized that these small gestures were the threads weaving a closeness she hadn't anticipated. At one point, she handed him a teacup from the kitchen counter. Their fingers met, brushing lightly, and the warmth of his hand transferred through that fleeting contact. She noticed how his thumb hovered near hers, almost touching, as if testing a boundary, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she let the touch linger for a heartbeat longer than necessary, feeling a quiet thrill in the simple human connection. It was not overtly romantic, yet the intimacy in that moment was undeniable. They laughed softly over a minor mishap, a stack of magazines tipping over, and he quickly steadied it, their hands brushing again. She felt the spark of shared amusement, the gentle bonding of two people who were, for a moment, completely absorbed in each other's presence. The room felt warmer, smaller, as if the world beyond the walls had faded, leaving only the two of them in a space defined by quiet laughter, fleeting touches, and mutual curiosity. For her, there was a strange mix of comfort and alertness. She was aware of the age difference, of the societal expectations, yet the ease of their interaction pulled her closer. She noticed the subtle rise and fall of his chest, the way his eyes held hers when he laughed, and the quiet steadiness he brought into the room simply by being there. For him, too, the attraction was quiet but potent. He noticed the soft warmth of her smile, the gentle gestures of her hands, the way her presence seemed to fill the space without demanding anything. By the time he finally stood to leave, the air between them was charged with unspoken understanding. They shared a brief, lingering glance, fingers brushing once more as he passed the doorway. Both of them felt it, the first true sense of intimacy that went beyond words, beyond reason, and yet remained safe and human. It was a quiet, domestic moment, ordinary in one sense but extraordinary in the emotional resonance it carried. The next evening, the house felt quieter than usual, the kind of silence that invites reflection. She was in the kitchen, absently rinsing dishes, when he appeared in the doorway again. He lingered there for a moment, uncertain whether to step fully inside. There was something different in his gaze tonight, a hesitancy intertwined with warmth, as if he carried a question he didn't dare voice. She motioned for him to come in, and he did, slowly, his steps deliberate. The dim light cast a soft glow over the room, highlighting the subtle lines of his face, and the way his hair fell slightly into his eyes. He set down the small bag he had brought, and their eyes met again. For a moment, silence held them together, weighty and intimate, each aware of the space between them yet reluctant to fill it with words. I didn't expect to see you here again," she said softly, her voice carrying an unintentional tenderness. He smiled, a little sheepishly, and shrugged. "I just wanted to check in. Make sure you were doing okay." His words were simple, but the sincerity behind them struck her in a way she hadn't anticipated. She felt a gentle warmth spreading through her chest, the kind that comes from being truly seen. She leaned against the counter, folding her arms loosely, feeling the subtle tension of anticipation. There was something in his presence that made her heart rate quicken, an unspoken pull she tried to rationalize away. She thought about the age difference, about propriety, about the casual boundaries they shouldn't cross. And yet, here he was, a quiet anchor in the soft, dimly lit kitchen. His gaze steady, patient, and somehow understanding. Feeling a sudden courage, she shared something she rarely voiced aloud. A small, personal story, a moment of vulnerability that revealed a side of her rarely exposed. Her voice wavered slightly as she spoke, the confession gentle and intimate. He listened with full attention, his eyes locked on hers, leaning just slightly forward as if to absorb every word. His presence was grounding, yet electrifying, a strange contradiction that left her both comforted and aware of a fluttering in her chest. At one point, her hand brushed against his as she reached for a mug. The contact was slight, almost accidental, but it carried an intensity neither of them could ignore. His fingers lingered near hers, hesitant yet reassuring, and for a heartbeat, they simply allowed the moment to exist. Words weren't needed. The connection was in the quiet touch, in the way their eyes held one another, in the shared understanding that something unspoken had begun to bloom between them. Both felt the unspoken tension, the pull of something delicate, intriguing, and forbidden. He knew the societal boundaries, the unlikeliness of the connection. She was aware of the social implications, of the cautious restraint required. And yet, in the quiet of that kitchen, under the warm glow of lamplight, the distance between their hearts shrank. Vulnerability had created intimacy, and hesitation had intensified desire. Not a desire for recklessness, but for closeness, understanding, and the warmth of being truly acknowledged. By the time he left that evening, the air between them was charged with something more profound than attraction. It was a shared acknowledgement of fragility and connection, a promise unspoken but deeply felt. The story of their bond was quietly beginning, stitched together with small touches, lingering glances, and the delicate vulnerability that made both hearts ache with anticipation. A few days later, the quiet of the evening had wrapped the house in a kind of intimate stillness. The rain had begun, soft at first, then steady enough to patter gently against the windows, a soothing soundtrack to the unexpected tension simmering in the living room. She sat on the couch, a book in her lap more for appearance than for reading, while he lingered nearby, a casual presence that seemed to expand the space between them in the most peculiar way. They hadn't planned this moment, yet it had come effortlessly. He was sitting close enough that their knees almost touched, an awareness that neither could ignore. She could feel the subtle heat radiating from him, the steady rhythm of his breath, and a quiet electricity in the slight brush of their shoulders when he shifted. It was intimate without words, a closeness that teased the boundaries of propriety while remaining carefully restrained. Their conversation was light at first, drifting from shared memories with her stepson to trivial jokes about the weather. But beneath the casual banter, a charged silence lingered. Glances met and lingered just a second too long, smiles were softer, and the pauses between words carried meaning heavier than the sentences themselves. She caught herself noticing the gentle line of his jaw, the curve of his lips when he laughed, and the way his eyes softened when he looked at her. A sudden brush of his hand against hers startled her. Not because it was inappropriate, but because of how it resonated. It was accidental, he claimed, yet neither of them moved away. She felt the warmth of his fingers, the almost imperceptible pressure that lingered, and a surprising flutter in her chest. For the first time, the physical closeness between them became as potent as their emotional connection, a delicate dance of restraint and awareness. She shifted slightly, and he mirrored the movement instinctively, a subtle reflection that made her heart skip. Every small touch, every grazing of their arms or knees, was magnified in the quiet of the room. There was no rush, no overt gesture, yet the tension hummed through the space like a delicate current, unseen but undeniable. He leaned back slightly, his shoulder brushing hers again, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to vanish. She felt the warmth of his body, the soft exhale of his breath as he laughed quietly, and the lingering scent of him that was subtle, comforting, and a little intoxicating. She realized that the attraction had deepened, no longer just curiosity or fleeting admiration, but a quiet pull rooted in shared moments, unspoken understanding, and the thrill of something forbidden yet innocent. By the time the evening wound down, the rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, leaving the room heavy with the scent of damp earth and warmth. They remained close on the couch longer than necessary, sharing smiles, lingering glances, and the quiet electricity of hands nearly touching. Neither spoke of the desire humming just beneath the surface, but both felt it. An unspoken agreement that something was blossoming, something that neither time nor propriety could fully contain. It was a slow burn, delicate yet undeniable. A tension built on subtle touches, shared space, and the quiet intimacy that comes from simply being near someone who makes your heart feel simultaneously at ease and awake. That evening, the house felt unusually intimate. The world outside had quieted under the soft glow of streetlights, the occasional rustle of leaves and distant hum of traffic the only reminders that life continued beyond the walls. She had been in the living room, curled up on the couch with a blanket draped over her shoulders, when he appeared in the doorway again. The air shifted subtly at the sight of him, familiar yet charged with something new. He paused at the threshold, as if weighing the rightness of stepping fully into her space. Her heart fluttered, not with alarm, but with anticipation. Something had changed in the last few days, in the quiet moments, the lingering touches, the shared glances that said more than words ever could. Tonight, she sensed the same unspoken tension vibrating through the room, a delicate current between them, both thrilling and slightly dangerous. He began, hesitating, his eyes searching hers for permission to continue. She tilted her head slightly, encouraging him without words. I've been meaning to say something, he added, voice low, tinged with vulnerability. Her chest tightened, a mixture of excitement and trepidation settling in her stomach. She leaned back slightly, careful yet open, as he took a hesitant step closer. The dim lamp light highlighted the subtle tension in his posture, the way his fingers curled and uncurling nervously at his sides. Being here, he continued, with you, it's been unexpected but comforting, more than I realized I needed. Her heart responded before her mind could intervene. She felt warmth pooling in her chest, a fluttering that seemed to echo in her fingertips. She realized that she, too, had been feeling the same thing. The quiet pull, the subtle longing, the awareness of his presence that made her breath catch in a way it hadn't before. I know, she admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't expect to feel this either. But I do. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. The room seemed to shrink, the world outside forgotten, leaving only the two of them suspended in this fragile, electric space. She noticed the slight tremor in his hands, the way his chest rose and fell with a quiet intensity, and the honesty in his gaze that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. Gently, almost accidentally, their hands brushed. This time, the contact wasn't fleeting. It lingered, warm and grounding. He didn't pull away, and she didn't either. Instead, they allowed the moment to exist, rich with emotion, vulnerability, and a shared recognition that something meaningful had begun. I admire you, he said finally, voice low, carrying an unspoken reverence. Not just like this, he gestured subtly to the tension in the room, but everything about you. The way you handle things, the way you see people, the way you make this place feel like home. Her chest tightened further, a soft, bittersweet ache. And I admire you too, she whispered, the words trembling, honest and raw. More than I should, perhaps, but I can't pretend I don't. In that quiet room, under the gentle lamplight and soft patter of rain outside, they reached an unspoken understanding. Boundaries existed, and reality could not be ignored. But for this fleeting, suspended moment, they allowed themselves the warmth, closeness, and acknowledgement of feelings that neither could hide anymore. It was the peak of their tension, the culmination of days of subtle glances, hesitant touches, and quiet confessions. A slow burn coming to life in a single, charged, intimate encounter. The rain had finally softened into a gentle drizzle, leaving the night crisp and the air faintly fragrant with the scent of damp earth and lingering warmth from the home. Inside, the living room felt cocooned in a quiet intimacy, the lamp casting a soft glow that illuminated the subtle lines of her face and the warmth in his eyes. Tonight, nothing needed to be said at length. They had already confessed their feelings, and the unspoken understanding between them carried more weight than any words could. They found themselves sitting closer than before on the couch, shoulders brushing lightly, the simple proximity sending a comforting warmth through both of them. She rested her head lightly against his shoulder, just enough to feel the steadiness of his presence without crossing any boundaries. He shifted slightly, draping a blanket over both of them, the softness surrounding them like a protective cocoon. It was domestic, ordinary in some ways, yet extraordinary in how it made their hearts feel connected and at ease. Her fingers traced the edge of the blanket, occasionally brushing against his hand. Neither moved to pull away. Instead, they allowed the lingering contact to be a quiet affirmation of closeness. The warmth of his hand against hers was subtle but grounding, each gentle squeeze carrying more meaning than words could convey. She felt the rise and fall of his chest, the familiar cadence of his breathing, and it brought a rare calm to the fluttering in her own heart. They spoke softly, not needing to fill the space with unnecessary dialogue. Shared glances, gentle smiles, and the occasional laugh created a rhythm between them, a language of intimacy built on trust, understanding, and the quiet acknowledgement of desire restrained with care. She noticed the small details, the way his eyes softened when they met hers, the slight warmth of his hand brushing her fingers, the way his presence seemed to make the room brighter without a single word. For him, the moment was equally transformative. He had admired her from afar, felt drawn to her strength and grace, and yet he had never imagined this quiet closeness, the domesticity of a shared evening, the comfort of being near someone who saw him, truly saw him. The thrill of proximity was there, yes, but it was tempered by respect and care, making every touch, every glance, every shared smile feel sacred. Time seemed to stretch and bend around them. Outside, the drizzle slowed further, the night air cool and fragrant. Inside, they remained wrapped in a cocoon of quiet warmth. The tension of days past softened into a tender ease. They both understood that their bond was special, fragile, and carefully nurtured. A connection not just of attraction, but of deep emotional intimacy. Finally, she lifted her head slightly, meeting his gaze. "I'm glad you came," she whispered, her voice steady yet filled with feeling. He smiled softly, his thumb brushing lightly across her hand. "Me too," he replied, the words simple, yet heavy with unspoken understanding. As the night continued, they remained close, neither needing more than the quiet comfort of presence, the gentle touch of hands, and the acknowledgement of hearts quietly aligned. The story of their slow-burn connection had reached a fulfilling conclusion, an emotionally satisfying resolution where affection, longing, and respect existed side by side. No words were rushed, no boundaries were broken, yet the intimacy between them was unmistakable. It was a moment suspended in time, warm, tender, and human, a quiet ending that was also a beginning, a slow, steady flame of connection that neither would forget, safe, cherished, and beautifully complete. If this slow burn story made your heart race and kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more age gap romance tales that explore the beauty of connection, longing, and unexpected love. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of our next story.